What do you think about that, Kevin, now that we finally got you on? Sorry about that. We are really excited. For all the listeners that are listening to 22 West Radio, which is 88.1 FM HD3, we got Kevin Foxe, the executive producer for the cult classic, The Blair Witch Project. How's it going, Kevin?
Hey, Chris. All right, well, two things. Go Boston. Sorry to say that. I grew up on the East Coast.
Oh, no, here comes the Red Sox.
My kids are all Dodgers fans, so, they can say go Dodgers. I'll have to say go Boston.
Well, your kids have good taste.
Yep, audience out.
And on the spitball, how did they grandfather those guys in? How did they prove they were, would they check their saliva or something?
I guess, they used to be able to chew tobacco back in the tobacco days before the big gum. And they would spit, and they would, like, spit on the ball, and they would have, like, weird slimy grease on their hands, and there was these fans that would actually try to figure out when they would actually do a spitball. So it became...
Oh, no, I grew up in that era.
Oh, you
I
did?
remember it. I'm
So
saying, how did they say, this guy can use it, but this guy can't? Age? Was it by age?
It was by, it was.
Yeah, right.
It was by age. So if they were like, this is the only way they can pitch, then they allowed them to have it. And the younger guys just had to give it up.
That's hilarious. Oh, man. Hey, you can't spit, kids. Sorry.
Yep, you're too young. Ha ha.
Only Rondo can. Ah, that's hilarious.
Ouch.
You can only do it to Chris Paul. But you know what? Let's really get into it. We are really excited to have you on the show, Kevin. And, this is huge. I think it's especially really exciting, especially since we got Halloween coming up on Wednesday. And to me, the Blair Witch Project is one of the most iconic films of all time. And I think it's so exciting that you were a part of it, especially since it's one of the most well-known independent films, especially since one of the few facts I found on here, which I think would be great to, talk with you today about is, one of the things that I found out about the Blair Witch Project is you guys had a minuscule budget of about less than $25,000 to actually make this film happen.
I think it was 38, but yeah, it was certainly low budget, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, especially with the kind of success you guys had, over the summer with that film where you guys grossed over about $240 million, which I think is super incredible. I bet you got to feel really good about that even to this day.
Yeah, it was, look, coming out of the indie film world, it was a big deal because that was kind of all of our goal, right? We wanted to make a film that, it was at a time when, equipment had changed, right? You could suddenly get your hands on, low-budget film equipment, and it was digital, but it was, you could finally make stuff, but it was still hard. I mean, they shot that on a high-8 digital camera. That's unheard of, right? And then we had to transfer to film at one point. It was ridiculous.
And it was also the start of the internet having the social platform.
Yeah, a lot of things came together at one point. Yeah, it was low-cost film equipment for filmmakers, and the internet was sort of just starting. You couldn't stream a film yet, but you could sort of if you wanted to wait, 3 hours, 4 hours.
As the dial tone, do.
Exactly. And then you'd go away for 3-4 hours and go, hey, it downloaded 3/4 of the film. All right.
Almost there.
That's
but yeah, but it was more about getting the word out. I think you finally had a way to talk to a lot of people without the use of a distribution system that a studio ruled, and that was crucial to what we were doing at the time as well.
And Kevin, I have to say, I think it is us millennials that were the reason it was so successful. Because we understood the internet. We understood the internet, word of mouth, and how to buzz something before anybody knew what buzzing anything meant.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, and I don't even know, does that exist now? I think even that's changed, right?
It is, yes.
It's hard now to do that,
Well, you jaded us.
Well, yeah.
We did. The other thing we did was we were the original fake news, right? We created this thing that was not real, and everyone thought it was real.
I think that's so interesting that you said fake news. I mean, I think that's pretty interesting because I think one of the really cool things about the Blair Witch Project was I remember when you had the website to even back up the film. I mean, the only one I can really remember was Space Jam at the time, and they had the little planets. But what made it so exciting about the Blair Witch Project was they had the website, and they had all this extra content for.
No, that's what it was. There were websites for sure. I mean, I can think of a few others that studios had a website, but it wasn't being used the way we used it, which was here was this sort of universe of horror in the backstory, and that was the only place we could put it was on the internet. We spent our $38,000 on making the film. We didn't have any more money to go make more content, so it was the internet. We could put it up there for nothing.
Yeah, because I heard you guys had over like 19 hours of footage, and then you guys had to cram this down to like 90 minutes. And I heard,
I think they had more because there was
Wow.
a whole other section of content that they created. The film originally was going to be not just them in the woods; it was going to be interviews with their parents, and it was going to be more like a cop show back in the day, where they would talk to they would recreate stuff and have these, the interviews with the cops and the parents and witches and all. So they shot a lot more footage as well, but we decided not to use any of that. That then spun off and created a show for, it was called The Curse of the Blair Witch.
Yeah, I remember that.
Another separate
oh, that
show
was on
then
Sci-Fi. I think it
I was going to say, so we took all that footage, edited it together as like a mini doc, and put it on Sci-Fi. So,
Wow, that's a great
cool.
idea.
And I have to say, Kevin, I'm going to send you my therapist bill because it was the first time I realized the internet could lie to me because I swore up and down it was real. And I used to have arguments with people. And I was like, it's real. This really happened. And then I found out you lied to me.
Well, we never lied. What we said was, once upon a time, we really did. It was sort of Star Wars too, right? In a galaxy far, far away. And you're supposed to believe it's real. We said in October these kids disappeared. We never said it was real. We were very careful of that.
You were very careful, so I can't sue you.
Well, you can't sue us, and I won't pay for your therapist bill.
Dang it.
But you know what? I think this is very interesting. I don't even know how true this is, Kevin, but this is what I found on the internet about the Blair Witch Project, which I think is very interesting. I heard the two co-directors who originally wrote it, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Eduardo and why am I blanking out? Dan
Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, yep.
Yeah, and one of the things I heard was these guys went to film school together. They wrote this script as like an outline at first. Didn't really have a dialogue in place for the script, and I guess they originally wanted to improvise the whole movie by basically getting actors to have like these GPS trackers. And you guys
did, yeah. Even more importantly, there was three other producers, but one of them, Greg Hale, had a lot of military background.
Oh, that's interesting.
So with him, they decided to just send these kids into the woods with cameras.
I love that.
And they followed them. They had a GPS tracker, and they would follow them, 40, 50 yards away and watch them with binoculars. And they were kind of improvising. And then, so that was 3 or 4 days of camping that they were off doing this. But then they would go in and mess with them while they were sleeping and then disappear again. And they would just, kind of track them and follow them. And the funny story is they were lost for a little while. They disappeared and nobody could find them.
Okay, that's crazy.
That's creepy.
So this is the story. The story is better. It was raining so much, and they were done. They were just sick of it. So the three actors found a house nearby and asked some old lady if they could use her dryer. She gave them, the hot cups of cocoa. They dried all their clothes and then came back into the woods.
That is hilarious because, the more info that I got on here was, you guys, gave them, a plastic canister, basically, containing, notes. It wasn't dialogue.
Individuals. It was very important. It was the individuals. So each character had things to do against the other characters, and they didn't know, right? So
wow.
And as they played it out and improvised it, they weren't sure if they were thinking of it. Was it a no? They didn't know.
This is a reality TV show that must happen now. Kevin, please.
Well, you know what's funny? That's the other thing.
I want to watch this.
That's the other thing that came out of it was reality TV kind of came out of Blair Witch. When we think about Survivor and things, I met that producer years later, and he said that was a huge influence on shows of that time.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, especially with that whole handheld camera movement, it felt like VHS. It was great. I mean, I think a lot of kids still even relate to it today because, we're on our iPhones 24/7. We even shoot like that. I mean, there was a film like Tangerine Orange that was all filmed on their iPhone, which was amazing. But people like to relate to that because they do it all the time, 24/7 on the internet, posting all their stuff. That's why I think it's so cool that you guys did that. But don't eat buttered popcorn when you're watching the Blair Witch Project.
Why? What happened?
Oh my gosh, when it's all jiggling around and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying? I'm not throwing up in panic, but I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what makes it feel so real.
That's a good point, Chris. You brought up, a lot of people complained about the shaky cam and how they were feeling, nauseous. And today, that's in everything we watch on YouTube or on, online. It's almost all handheld and shaky. So there's been a generation that's grown accustomed to it. I don't think it bothers anybody anymore.
No, not me at all. That must have been my parents. My parents must have been like, this movie is very shaky.
But there was that one film, Cloverfield, which got me like a little way too much. But I think that's what's so great.
Well, Cloverfield also, by the way, he loved Blair Witch, and a lot of what he did was because of what we influenced on him. He said, I wanted to kind of recreate that. And he was very much a fan of Blair Witch when he made Cloverfield.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely believe it, because I think that's what also brings such a unique twist to even your film, because basically, we get this like nauseating feeling, but we're already kind of wheezy about what the heck's really going on in this film.
Oh, no, that was intended. It was to also make you feel a little more unsettled, which was, POV has been used in films previously, but not to that extent, right? You'll see the POV shot whenever the killer is hiding in the bushes or whatever, but they're not running and chasing because, again, back in the day, you didn't want to have a shot like that. We truly wanted those shots. They were really helpful.
And
we also had the first great video selfie when she sits down and makes her confession. Great things, right? We had the selfie and the confession. Now
that's what sold me that it was real. Is when she had the camera on herself and the snot coming out of her nose. Right. I was like, what real person would want to have themselves videotaped with snot coming out of their
what
nose?
Actress, right? What actress would do that? Yeah.
But I think that's what's so unique about this whole experience. I mean, like, this is so real. Like, it's unbelievably real. I mean, even just talking about the whole snot from the girl, and like, she's like probably really sick, like you said. And like, we don't even see the whole, like you were saying about finding grandma's house and trying to even just dry off the clothes. That's
they were not feeling, they didn't have a lot of food. They were soaking wet and camping for 3 or 4 days. But also under the stress of making the film, right? Having to improvise, having to play character. It was grueling on them, that's for sure.
I mean, one of the funniest things that I saw was, I guess during the audition process, at least one of the directors would ask these actors who are auditioning for this role, they would ask them, you've been to jail for the last 9 years. We're the parole board. Why should we let you go? And if they did not respond quick enough, you were already cut from the auditions.
Heather got the part because she said, I don't think you should let me out.
Ooh.
They loved that. They were like, she's right on. She is right on.
Like, that's our person.
I like her, Heather. I like you.
Well, that's another thing we forget about the film, too. It was a female director making a film, right? It was a female protagonist. That's a big deal when you think about back in 99. That was a big deal.
That was a huge thing for myself as a woman. I love the fact that she was the main person. She didn't die first. I was like, usually I'm like, okay, you're going to be dead. Yeah. She wasn't the victim in the sense that she continued forward and tried to find people, and she really was, to me, like the heroine of the movie, and I really love that.
Yeah, I agree. And she, like I said, she had to be the director of this film with 2 slacker crew members, They didn't want to do anything, and she had to keep driving and pushing them. So
yeah, they deserve to die.
Great character.
But, like, that even goes off to the point where, like, that's terrible to say. Like,
I'm sorry. But it's true. Slackers got to go.
But I think that's what's so great about it, because even when that film came out, like, people literally thought the 3 actors were dead.
Oh, there's great stories on that. I mean, a funny one was at the premiere in Los Angeles, they threw an after party at this fancy restaurant, and Heather is all dressed up and looks beautiful, because she is. She's just a beautiful actress. I mean, she was wonderful. And I'm standing there. Her and I were chatting at the bar, I think it was, and this guy came over and started talking to us. And he was just, I don't know who he was, actually, to this day, but he said, it's so sad that they died. And I said, well, you're talking to Heather right now, and he would not believe us. He could not fathom that this was the same Heather. And she showed him her license and everything, and he said, no, they're dead. You guys are just pulling my leg. Come on.
Wow.
He would not believe us. It was fantastic. Heather was just dying. She's like, are you kidding me?
I was in his shoes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just blown away, because I think that's so funny, because like even some of the things, like, because the studio company you guys were with was Artisan, right? but
Yes.
they're like no longer around, I believe. But
Well, they've been accumulated by Lionsgate. So Lionsgate bought Artisan back in the day, yeah.
Gotcha. Because, like, one of the things, like, I guess, like, these guys, you know, the actors, they went to, like, great length to actually try to stay away from press while you guys are even
Well,
doing
that
it.
was a studio choice. We were kind of okay with it. And if you see at Sundance, there was quite a bit of interviews and photo shoots with the actors. And then Artisan decided to keep playing that sort of, no, maybe they really were real. Maybe they did die. And then one day, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks after Sundance, we noticed that on IMDb they had been listed as dead now, and I was like,
Oh my gosh.
hold on, that doesn't help these actors' careers, guys.
Yeah, right. I think we're actually pushing the limit a little bit too much on this.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
It's
and
almost
the actors were struggling with that as we went through. There was this huge, swell of press, right? They wanted to get that press because that helped your career, and Artisan was not booking any interviews for the actors. It was tough.
Oh,
It was
man.
Oh
tough.
wow! So yeah, as much as it's like it was great for the film, but it really wasn't for the actors, which I
No,
think is
not at
kinda
all.
interesting. That is
They
interesting.
all had a hard time. I mean, it's taken some of them. I mean, Heather finally left the business and wrote a book, and she's awesome. She's done amazing things. Mike kind of left for a while and just recently was in a CSI episode. So he plays with
Nice.
acting and teaches acting. And Josh actually waited a little while. He booked 2 or 3 big films. He was in a Robert De Niro film with Cuba Gooding Jr., but a small part, and it took him a while. But he's now directing and doing a lot of great film work. He's
That's
awesome.
fabulous.
Yeah. But it did take a while for people to forget they weren't dead.
That's amazing. You're like, no, literally, I'm on CSI, and they're like, no, it's really not you. It almost reminds me of like that incident that happened this week with like the guy on Friends.
Oh my God, the swimmer. That's where my husband's from.
How great
He's
is
from-
that, right?
Wasn't that hilarious?
Yeah.
Like, and then like nowadays in 2018, you have to literally be like going on Twitter and go, no, guys, really, it wasn't me.
So my husband's
it wasn't
from.
me. It wasn't me. I'm still alive.
Yeah, my husband's from Blackpool, right? So of course I'm like, okay, who do you know that looks like David Schwimmer? I'm like, this is amazing.
It's amazing. Well, did you see Schwimmer's response where
Yeah.
he videoed himself with the beer? I mean, it
In New
looked
York?
just like
Here's
the
my
same
alibi.
shot. Yeah.
Oh, that is so funny. I gotta see that.
Yeah, it's really funny because he matched it almost perfectly.
He really
That to me, that's the beauty of the internet now, which is you can do stuff like that. You can take a phone and go film something that quickly, right, and put it up. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it keeps the content nice and fresh and interesting.
Maybe that's gonna be like the next horror.
Who's David Schwimmer?
Yeah.
Well, I think about the next horror a lot. Like, what is the next horror? And I think about what we have for technology. Horror is always about what scares us.
Yeah.
And if technology isn't scary, I don't know what is.
Ain't that
know
the
what?
truth?
Somebody's going to make something you watch that's going to be the next Blair Witch. I hope so.
Yeah, and it's going to be something with digital technology or whatever it is. But you know what, Kevin?
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much again for coming on for the Just Talking segment. We really do appreciate it. And all the listeners out there.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. You are amazing.
And one of these days, hopefully, we can get you in the studio and do this again. This was great. And
Yeah, sorry I couldn't come in. I had a conference call in a little bit here, so I couldn't come in. But next time I'll come down to the studio.
Perfect. We love it. And I just want to tell all the listeners out there that are listening on 88.1 FM HD3, that was Kevin Foxe, the executive producer for the 1999 cult classic, The Blair Witch Project. Thank you again, Kevin.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
All
Bye.
right. Peace out.